Welcome to the deep dive.
Good.
Today, we're going to be exploring something that might seem a little bit out of place in a world obsessed with noise.
Yeah.
Silence. We're going to be diving into the book Golden, The Power of Silence in a World of Noise by Justin Talbot Zorn and Lee Marzek.
Interesting.
And trust me,
Yeah.
this isn't just some new age self-help thing.
Right.
We're going to be going way beyond relaxation tips.
Yeah.
And really talking about silence as a tool for personal growth, for social change,
Okay.
and maybe even societal transformation.
So it's fascinating how this book reframes silence.
Right.
You know, it's not just about finding a quiet spot. It's about accessing a presence, an awareness that can be tapped into even amidst chaos.
Right, like that story about Cyrus Habib, the politician who left it all behind to become a Jesuit priest.
Interesting.
I mean, talk about a career change.
Yeah.
But it wasn't just about, finding quiet time.
Yeah.
It was about him redefining what success meant. He realized that the constant noise of politics, fundraising, ego-boosting, never-ending chatter was actually hindering his deeper purpose.
And that's such a powerful idea for anyone listening.
Yeah.
What if our definition of success is actually getting in the way of what truly matters?
Right.
Makes you think about all the noise that we accept in our own lives.
Right.
Not just the audible kind,
Right.
but the informational and internal noise too.
Absolutely. Then there's Lee Marzek, the co-author,
Oh, okay.
who found silence in a completely different setting, a psychiatric ward after the birth of her daughter.
Wow.
Imagine finding peace amidst that kind of intensity.
It speaks to the idea that silence isn't something external.
Yeah.
It's an internal state that we can cultivate regardless of our surroundings.
Right.
And for Marzek, that internal silence was a breakthrough,
Right.
a way to cut through the overwhelming mental noise she was experiencing.
Yeah, it's like silence is more of a skill than a circumstance. It's something that we can train ourselves to access.
Yeah.
Like a muscle that we can strengthen.
Absolutely.
And then there's Justin Talbot Zorn,
Okay.
the other author, finding pockets of stillness in the NICU with his newborn twins.
Oh, wow.
You'd think that would be the ultimate noise zone.
Yeah, it shows that even in the most chaotic environments,
Yeah.
those little gaps, those moments between the beeps and the alarms
Right.
can become opportunities to tap into a different kind of presence.
Right.
Challenges the notion that we need perfect conditions for silence.
Right.
It's about finding those cracks of quiet within the chaos.
Which brings us to the book's definition of noise. Unwanted distraction.
Yeah.
It's not just about loud sounds.
Right.
It's about anything that pulls us away from what truly matters, whether it's a notification on our phone,
Okay.
a worry looping in our minds,
Yeah.
or even societal pressures that keep us on this hamster wheel of busyness. And the book doesn't shy away from pointing fingers at what fuels this culture of noise.
Right. What do they point to?
One culprit that they call out
Okay.
is convenience addiction.
Interesting.
We've become so accustomed to instant gratification and constant stimulation that we've lost touch with the value of stillness. Think about how often you check your phone,
Yeah.
how many tabs you have open on your computer,
Right.
how much information you consume on a daily basis.
Yeah, it's like we're addicted to the dopamine rush of the
Yeah.
next new thing, the next notification, the next update.
It's almost like we've traded our attention spans for convenience.
Absolutely.
And the book suggests that this constant craving for convenience has a ripple effect,
Yeah.
contributing to a culture obsessed with speed and productivity.
Right. And they tie this back to our reliance on GDP as the primary measure of progress.
Yeah.
It's all about more, faster, bigger,
Right.
without much regard for the mental, emotional, or even spiritual costs.
Yeah.
It's like we're on this treadmill
Yeah.
of production and consumption
Right.
and silence, reflection, deep thought.
Right.
Those things get pushed aside.
Which leads to some pretty alarming consequences. The book dives into research on the stress hormone cortisol
Okay.
and how noise literally depletes our cognitive resources.
Yeah.
It's not just about feeling frazzled.
Right.
It's about our ability to think clearly, to make sound decisions,
Yeah.
even connect with others on a deeper level.
They give some pretty compelling examples, like
Yeah.
how noise pollution impacts sleep quality, affects concentration,
Right.
and even hinders creativity.
Right.
It's like our brains are constantly on high alert, trying to filter out the noise, and that takes a toll on our overall well-being.
Right.
So how do we reclaim silence in this kind of world? Well, the book offers a surprising approach.
Okay.
Nada yoga, or sound yoga.
Okay, sound yoga. Tell me more.
It's about training yourself to listen deeply to everyday sounds.
Not as distractions, but as pathways to inner stillness. They share a story about a woman named J. Newton Small, who discovered this practice during lockdown.
Interesting.
She started paying close attention to the sounds around her, the birds chirping, the wind rustling the leaves.
Right.
And she found that this mindful listening actually led her to a deeper sense of silence within.
It's like turning the cacophony of everyday life
Right.
into a meditation.
Exactly.
Instead of resisting the noise, you're leaning into it
Yeah,
in a way that allows you to find the quiet within.
exactly.
And it reminds me is what the book calls little gifts of silence, those unexpected pauses in the noise that we can learn to recognize and savor.
Exactly.
Think about those moments when the phone stops ringing,
Yeah.
the meeting ends, or the traffic light turns green.
It's so easy to just rush on to the next thing.
Right.
But what if we use those little breaks as an opportunity to reset?
Right. It's like a mini meditation.
Exactly. A chance to catch your breath and reconnect with yourself.
I remember that anecdote about Justin getting frustrated with a podcast interruption.
Yes.
It's such a relatable example.
It is.
He realized that instead of getting annoyed by the technical glitch, he could use that brief silence as a chance to relax and recenter.
Right.
It's about training ourselves to be present in those gaps,
Right.
even the unexpected ones.
So it's not just about seeking out silence. It's about being open to it, even when it finds us in unexpected ways.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's about being intentional with the sensory experiences that we choose.
Okay.
The book talks about using rituals like making coffee
Right.
as a doorway to mindfulness and silence.
There's something about the ritualistic aspect of it, the focus on each step, the aroma, the warmth of the mug that can bring us into a state of presence and quiet, the mental chatter.
Right.
It's like taking an ordinary activity
Yeah.
and turning it into a mindful practice.
So we've talked about cultivating individual silence. But what about silence on a social level? How do we navigate that?
The book delves into how cultural norms can either amplify or diminish noise.
Right.
They share Lee's experience negotiating quiet time with her in-laws.
Okay.
It's about having respectful conversations and setting boundaries, even with those closest to us,
Yeah.
to create those shared spaces of silence.
That's so important.
Right.
It's about recognizing that everyone has different noise tolerances and
Yeah.
finding ways to accommodate those needs,
Absolutely.
even if it means having those sometimes awkward conversations
Yeah.
about boundaries and expectations.
Exactly.
And then there's that story about the experiment with the red sashes in an open plan office.
Oh, that one is fascinating.
It is.
It shows how even simple interventions can spark a larger conversation and cultural shift around noise.
Right.
Employees were encouraged to wear a red sash when they needed uninterrupted focus time,
Right.
which led to more awareness and respect for individual needs for quiet. It's a great example of how we can challenge those unspoken noise norms that often go unquestioned.
It's like creating a visual cue for respecting each other's need for focus and quiet,
Yeah,
even in a shared space.
exactly.
And speaking of space, the book brings in this Japanese concept of ma, the reverence for empty space.
Oh, interesting.
It's not just about physical space.
Yeah.
It's about the pauses and the silences in conversations, art, music, even in our thinking.
It's about recognizing the value of those empty spaces, those moments of pause
Right.
that give depth and meaning to everything around them.
Sure. So how do we apply ma in our own lives?
The book encourages us to be more mindful of the space we create in our workplaces, in our meetings, and our collaborations.
Okay.
It's about being comfortable with those moments of pause and reflection
Yeah.
instead of feeling the need to fill every second with noise and activity.
It's about giving our minds and our interactions some breathing room. So we've covered a lot of ground here, from personal practices to cultural norms.
Yeah.
But there's another dimension of silence the book explores
Okay.
that I find really compelling.
Yeah.
Its power for healing and social transformation.
That's where it gets really interesting.
It does.
They tell the story of Florence Nightingale,
Okay.
who, during the Crimean War, insisted on reducing noise in hospitals.
Interesting.
Even amidst the chaos and suffering of war, she recognized that noise was hindering the healing process.
Yeah.
And what's amazing is that her intuition is now backed by modern research
Right.
on the detrimental effects of noise on patient recovery.
It makes you wonder how much faster healing could happen if we prioritized quiet in healthcare settings.
Right.
And it's not just about physical healing.
Yeah.
The book also highlights silence as a tool for social change.
Interesting.
They share a powerful story about Sheena Malhotra,
Okay.
who participated in a Black Lives Matter protest and chose to sit in silence for 9 minutes.
It was a profound act of resistance and solidarity.
It was.
Her experience highlights how silence can be a way to amplify empathy and connection,
Right.
especially in moments of social and political unrest.
Right.
It's about creating space for deep listening and understanding instead of just reacting with more noise.
It's like saying, I'm here, I'm listening,
Right.
and I'm holding space for your pain.
Exactly.
And speaking of listening,
Yeah.
the book also talks about the Jesuit reparations process,
Okay.
which heavily relies on silent listening and contemplation to address historical injustices.
It's about creating a space where those who have been harmed can share their experiences without interruption, and those who have caused harm can truly listen and understand the impact of their actions.
Right.
It's a model for how silence can be used to foster dialogue, accountability, and ultimately reconciliation.
So we've talked about silence on a personal level,
Yeah.
a social level,
Yeah.
and now even on this level of historical healing. It's amazing how this one concept can touch so many aspects of our lives.
It is.
But I'm curious, what about the big picture?
Okay.
What would it look like to build a society that truly values and protects silence?
Right.
That's a question that we'll explore in part 2 of our deep dive.
I'm ready.
Stay tuned.
All right.
Welcome back to the deep dive.
Okay.
We're continuing our exploration of Golden, the power of silence in a world of noise.
Right.
And this time we're getting practical.
Okay.
You've talked about the why. Now it's time for the how.
Right.
What are some tangible ways we can invite more silence into our lives?
The book offers a variety of practices. And what's great is that they're not about adding more to your to-do list.
Right.
They're about shifting your perspective and finding those pockets of quiet that already exist.
Okay.
One of the simplest yet most powerful suggestions is to simply listen.
Just listen.
Yeah.
That seems almost too easy.
Right.
How do we just listen in a way that cultivates silence?
Well, it's about finding a quiet space, whether it's in nature or even just a quiet corner of your home, and tuning into the sounds around you.
right.
Don't put on music or a podcast. Just be present with the soundscape of that moment.
So no need to force the silence. Just open yourself to what's already there.
Exactly.
Okay.
Don't try to analyze the sounds or label them.
Right.
Just allow yourself to receive them. Interestingly, the authors found that trying to create silence can sometimes backfire.
Right.
It's like trying too hard to fall asleep. The effort itself becomes the obstacle.
Right.
Instead, just listen.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
It's about shifting from doing to being, from striving to receiving.
Exactly.
And I imagine as you practice this, you start to notice sounds you might have otherwise missed.
That's the beauty of it. When we truly listen,
Yeah.
we become aware of the subtle nuances of the sonic world around us.
Right.
The rustling of leaves, the distant hum of traffic, the chirping of birds. These everyday sounds can become doorways to a deeper awareness.
It's like expanding your sensory perception, turning into a frequency you didn't even know existed.
Exactly.
What other techniques resonated with you?
Well, the little gifts of silence concept really struck a chord with me.
Okay.
Those moments throughout the day when the noise pauses.
Yeah, we touched on this earlier, but I'm eager to hear more.
Right.
It's such a great way to reframe those little breaks in the action.
Think about those moments when a phone call ends.
Right.
The traffic light turns green. Or your computer finally finishes updating.
Okay.
We often rush to fill those gaps.
Right.
But what if we saw them as opportunities to pause and reset?
It's a mini meditation. It's a
Exactly.
chance to take a breath and reconnect with yourself.
Right. Instead of being annoyed by the interruption, you're welcoming it as a moment of respite.
I love that.
Yeah.
So the challenge, of course, is remembering to do it.
Right.
Our minds are so accustomed to constant stimulation that we often miss those little pockets of quiet.
Absolutely. The book encourages us to become more aware of these gifts of silence and to savor them, to allow ourselves to relax into them, even if it's just for a few seconds.
I love the imagery of relaxing into silence.
Yeah.
It's not about forcing it. It's about softening, surrendering to those moments of stillness.
Exactly.
And sometimes it's about intentionally creating sensory experiences that lead us to that state of presence.
Right.
The book talks about finding silence through everyday rituals like making coffee,
Yes, that's a great example.
Right.
It's about bringing mindfulness to those routine activities that we often do on autopilot.
Okay.
Slowing down, paying attention to each step,
Yeah.
engaging all of your senses.
I love that.
The aroma of the coffee beans, the sound of the grinder, the warmth of the mug in your hands, all of these sensory details can become anchors for the present moment, quieting the mental chatter.
It's like turning the ordinary into a meditation, finding the sacred in the mundane.
Exactly.
And it doesn't have to be coffee. It could be any ritual you find grounding and enjoyable.
Right.
What other sensory pathways to silence did they explore?
They talk about the power of poetry and storytelling
Okay,
as gateways to a different kind of silence.
that's interesting. How do words lead to silence?
Well, think about those times when you get lost in a good book or poem.
Right.
Your attention is completely captivated and you're transported to another world.
Yeah.
The author suggests that this kind of immersion can be a form of silence
Okay.
because it allows us to step out of our usual thought patterns and enter a state of deep engagement.
It's like silencing the inner critic,
Yeah.
the constant chatter of the mind, by giving it something else to focus on something beautiful and absorbing.
Right.
And I imagine that kind of focus has ripple effects beyond the moment of reading or listening.
Absolutely.
It might make you more present in your interactions, more aware of your surroundings.
Exactly. It's about cultivating a quality of attention that can then permeate other areas of your life.
I love that.
And speaking of presence, one of the most accessible and powerful ways to find silence is through nature.
Oh, I'm so glad they included this. Spending time in nature is my go-to for stress relief and finding a sense of peace.
Right.
There's something about being surrounded by trees, water, the vastness of the sky that just calms the nervous system.
It's a classic for a reason. The book highlights research showing that exposure to nature lowers stress levels,
Right.
improves mood, and even enhances cognitive function.
Right.
And it doesn't have to be a grand wilderness adventure.
Right.
Even a short walk in the park or listening to birdsong can have a profound effect.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's about finding those little pockets of nature wherever you are, whether it's tending a houseplant, watching the clouds drift by,
Right.
or simply taking a moment to appreciate the sunset.
Exactly.
And it ties back to Florence Nightingale's insistence on fresh air, natural light, and views of nature for healing.
Absolutely.
It's amazing how her insights, once considered radical, are now being validated by science.
It speaks to this deep intuitive connection we have to the natural world.
I love it.
And speaking of connections, the book also points out that silence isn't always about finding quiet places.
Okay.
Sometimes it's about finding those activities that bring us into a state of flow.
Flow.
Yeah,
That feeling of being completely absorbed in an activity where time seems to disappear and you're fully present in the moment.
exactly.
Whether it's painting, playing music, writing, or even having a truly engaging conversation, those flow states can be incredibly powerful.
And the authors argue that flow states, regardless of the activity,
Yeah.
can be a pathway to a profound sense of silence.
Interesting.
It's like the mental chatter fades away because your attention is fully engaged with the task at hand.
Right.
They emphasize that finding activities that bring you into flow is crucial for cultivating silence in a world designed to constantly distract us.
It's about finding those pursuits that light you up.
Yeah.
Those things that make you lose track of time, where you're so engaged that you forget yourself.
Right.
And I think that speaks to a larger point the book makes about the importance of slowing down.
That's a huge one, especially in our always-on culture.
It is.
We're so accustomed to rushing from one thing to the next,
Right.
filling every moment with activity,
Yeah.
that we've lost touch with the art of slowing down.
So how do we break free from this cult of busyness?
Yeah.
How do we reclaim our time and attention?
The book offers some practical strategies, like simplifying your schedule,
Okay.
being more intentional about how you spend your time,
Right.
and learning to say no to things that don't align with your values.
Right.
It's about recognizing that you have a limited amount of energy and attention, and you get to choose how you spend those precious resources.
I love the phrase intentional about how you spend your time. It's
Yeah.
such a simple concept.
It is.
But it's so easy to lose sight of in the whirlwind of daily life.
Absolutely.
And it makes me think about boundaries, which are crucial for protecting our time and energy,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to technology.
Absolutely. Technology is a double-edged sword.
It is.
It connects us in amazing ways.
Right.
But it can also be a major source of distraction and information overload.
Right.
The constant notifications, the endless scroll, the fear of missing out.
Yeah.
It's a recipe for mental exhaustion.
It's like we're tethered to our devices.
Right.
And it's hard to disconnect.
Yeah.
But the book reminds us that we have a choice.
We do.
We can set boundaries, we can reclaim our attention,
That's
and we
right.
can choose to engage with technology in a way that serves us, not the other way around.
Right.
What are some specific strategies they recommend for setting boundaries with technology?
They suggest simple yet effective practices like turning off notifications,
Okay.
scheduling tech-free time, and being more mindful of how and when you use your devices.
Right.
It's not about becoming a Luddite.
Right.
It's about being intentional and setting limits so that technology enhances your life
Right.
rather than controlling it.
It's like creating a digital detox,
Yeah.
not necessarily a complete break, but a conscious choice to step away and reconnect with yourself and the world around you.
Exactly.
And I remember that intriguing concept they introduced, the Technology Assessment Board, inspired by the Amish approach.
Yes, that one really stuck with me.
It did.
The idea is to have a diverse group of experts,
Okay.
not just tech people,
Right.
but also ethicists, psychologists, sociologists,
Yeah.
who would carefully evaluate the potential impact of new technologies before they're widely adopted.
That's interesting.
It's like a filter for innovation,
Yeah.
ensuring that new gadgets and platforms are truly serving humanity,
Right.
not just adding to the noise and distraction.
I love that idea.
Yeah.
It's like asking ourselves, does this technology align with our values?
Right.
Does it contribute to our well-being or does it deplete it?
Exactly.
It's a radical shift in thinking about progress,
It is.
but it's a necessary one if we want to create a more mindful and sustainable future.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that not all progress is created equal. We need to be more discerning about the technologies we allow into our lives and our society.
Absolutely.
So we've explored a range of practices for cultivating silence,
We have.
from the individual level to this idea of a technology assessment board.
Yes.
But how do we scale this up?
Right.
How do we create a society that truly values and protects silence?
That's a great question.
That's what we'll explore in the final part of our deep dive.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We've been exploring Golden, the power of silence in a world of noise, and now we're in the final stretch of our journey. We've talked about personal practices and navigating social noise, but now I'm curious about the bigger picture. Can we create a society that actually values and protects silence? Is that even possible in our modern world?
It's a big question, but the book offers some really inspiring ideas. One that caught my attention is the concept of modern-day sanctuaries.
Okay.
Spaces intentionally designed for quiet and respite from the constant noise of city life.
I love that idea. It makes so much sense. We design spaces for everything else: fitness, work, entertainment. But what about spaces for simply being, for quiet contemplation?
Exactly. They talk about the need for urban oases,
Right.
quiet zones in parks, libraries with dedicated silent reading rooms, maybe even soundproof pods and public spaces where people can go to unplug and recharge.
Imagine a city where silence is woven into the very fabric of the environment. I can already feel my stress levels decreasing just thinking about it. It would be like a public health initiative, recognizing that silence is essential for mental and emotional well-being.
And it's not just about creating new spaces. It's also about rethinking how we use existing spaces. What if certain parks had designated quiet hours?
Right.
Or what if we designed buildings with sound-absorbing materials to create pockets of stillness within?
Those are great ideas. It would require a real paradigm shift, though. Our cities are designed for movement and efficiency, not necessarily for quiet contemplation. But what if we could change that? What if we could design cities that nourish the soul as much as they facilitate commerce and transportation?
It would be a radical shift,
Yeah.
but not an impossible one. The book argues that creating more silence-friendly environments would not only improve our quality of life,
Right.
but also boost our productivity and creativity. When we're not constantly bombarded with noise, we can think more clearly, focus more deeply, and come up with more innovative ideas.
It's like giving our brains a chance to breathe, to make those connections that spark creativity and insight. And I think it goes beyond the individual level, too. What if we designed workplaces that valued silence and deep work?
Imagine a world where meetings started with a minute of silence,
Right.
where open plan offices had designated quiet zones, where taking breaks for contemplation was encouraged, not seen as slacking off.
It would require a massive cultural shift, but it's not outside the realm of possibility. And it reminds me of that idea we discussed earlier, the Technology Assessment Board. It's such a bold concept, but it speaks to the need for a more conscious approach to technological innovation.
Right. The idea that we don't just blindly adopt every new gadget or platform,
Yeah.
but pause to consider its impact on our attention, our well-being, our ability to connect with each other and with ourselves. What if before releasing a new technology, we asked, does this add to the noise or does it create space for silence?
It would be a game changer. Instead of being driven by the relentless pursuit of progress, we could actually design a future that prioritizes human flourishing.
And speaking of progress, the book challenges us to rethink how we measure it all together.
Right now, it's all about GDP,
Right.
economic growth above all else. But what if we incorporated new metrics into our calculations, like happiness indices,
Yeah.
measures of social connection, access to nature, and even the availability of silence in our communities?
Right.
Now, that would be a revolution. It would mean acknowledging that true progress isn't just about material wealth. It's about the quality of our lives, our relationships, our connection to something larger than ourselves. It's about recognizing that silence, contemplation, and deep connection are not luxuries,
Right.
but essential human needs.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Golden, the power of silence in a world of noise, I'm left with this thought. What if, instead of trying to escape the noise, we learn to find the silence within it? What if we embrace those moments of quiet, those pauses in the action, as opportunities to reconnect with ourselves, with each other, and with the world around us?
It's a beautiful invitation. An invitation to listen more deeply, to speak more thoughtfully, to create more space for silence in our lives and in the world. And who knows, maybe by embracing silence, we can create a world that's not just quieter, but also wiser, more compassionate, more connected.
That's a world I want to live in. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found it insightful and inspiring. Now go out there and find some silence, or let the silence find you.